Thank you very much for taking the time to come and see us. We really appreciate it. Before we jump into it, can we ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you were doing before founding Artisan?
Yep. So thank you so much for having me, guys. My name's Edwin Harrison, and along with my wife Magda, we run and set up Artisan, Curious Fruit, and the Coffee School. You asked what we were doing before. Well, directly before we were living in Uganda, and before that we were in sort of very boring jobs in Australia. I worked in business development. Magda worked in corporate HR. And one night we got really drunk on red wine, basically. That sort of happy drunk where you're just giggling, you're having a good time. And we thought there must be more to life than the 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And we sort of started thinking about all the amazing things that we could do. And we decided to quit our jobs. And the funny thing is, the next morning we really did both go in and resign. And we didn't know what we were going to go and do, but we knew we wanted to do something different.
This was in Australia.
This was in Australia, yeah. And we decided to move to Uganda and work over there for a development organization. We literally Googled jobs in Africa, and up came a whole lot of different. Pretty much the first thing that came along, we sort of accepted. And we didn't want to travel. We didn't want to backpack. We'd sort of done that in our 20s. We wanted to use the skills we had. Yeah. We wanted to work, and we ended up in the Rwenzori Mountains in Kasese, which is a beautiful area in Uganda on the border of the Congo. And I was there to set up the beekeeping program, where we were developing a beekeeping project which is a sustainable. And it was just amazing. Yeah. And Magda was there setting up a vocational education. And what we discovered was that the first time in our lives, we were really motivated. We were working harder and faster in Uganda than we'd ever worked in Australia. And in Australia, we had anything we wanted: air conditioning, flat screen monitors, printers, the whole lot. Uganda is hot and dusty. The work was difficult, but we were working harder there than in Australia. And we started wondering why. And we identified that we were more motivated because they were our project. Our failures were our failures, and we had loads. But our successes were our successes. As we watched the beekeeping project go from 3 beekeepers to 13 to 30 to the 700 that we had when we left, it made us realize that it was that was motivating. So there, I remember on a rainy day in Uganda, we were in our little porch area, and we just wrote a little blue book, and we decided we'd never go back to big business, and we just wrote "Business Obsessed by Coffee." We put a circle around it. And they were the very first words we ever wrote about art. And from there, we just put a little spider diagram about what it might be, what it might look like. And when we arrived back in the UK, we took that little spider diagram and created what people know and see and love now.
That's amazing.
Is this 2010?
2010.
Okay.
And we opened our first shop in 2011.
So tell us about your journey. So you moved to London. The idea came about the coffee shop. So tell us a little bit about like how it all started, because obviously Australia, there's a big culture of coffee. So you might have encountered going to a nice coffee shop. So when you came to London, maybe tell us more about it, like how it all developed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it was almost through selfish reason, wasn't it? The coffee was so bad back then in London and coming from Perth in Western Australia, we knew there was amazing coffee.
Good coffee, yeah.
And we just looked at the chains, we looked at the Starbucks, Nero and these ones and thought, there must be more that we can do. And there was some shops beginning to sort of pop up. I'm not going to claim we were the first. You had Nude Espresso, you had Flat White, these amazing pioneers of the specialty coffee scene. But in Southwest London, where we were, there just wasn't anything. And we thought, what if we brought that sort of Australian vibe, that where you focus all your energy on the customer and the coffee, and you just make it right. And you make it, I could shut my eyes. I could tell you what soundtrack we should be playing. I could tell you what the staff were going to be feeling and, the vibe of the place. And that's what we wanted to create, that sort of atmosphere. So in sort of October the 31st, 2011, we opened our first shop in Putney. But we never wanted to be the adorable couple that ran a coffee shop on a corner. We would have killed each other by now if that was the case. We wanted to run a coffee business. So the decision to open the second shop was a relatively straightforward one. It got us out of working constantly together, which is a challenge. And And everyone says the second shop's the hard shop. That's the shop you've got to get right. You've got to get all your policies right, all these sorts of things, all your procedures, all your systems right. For us, it wasn't true. All that happened was Magda stayed the manager of Putney. I became the manager of Stamford Brook. And we ran the business in this weird competition with each other. You'd get home and go, how many cappuccinos did you sell today? How much banana bread did you sell? And, and you sort of have this weird sort of competition. And we had such a nice year doing that. And then, of course, we started thinking about what next. Why, what should we do? And as you guys probably know, back then, there were sort of three things going on in the industry. One was this idea of the chain with no name by James Hoffman, that was sort of saying all the coffee shops that were beginning to spring up, they were all had this opportunity to do something unique, but they all went for brick walls, scaffolding boards, baristas with tattoos and a flat cap and lamazocco, and congratulations, some light bulbs, and you've got yourself a independent coffee shop. And I remember thinking, how sad, because it's so rare in life. You have a blank canvas, something you can do completely anything you want with. Yet we're all doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So Magda and I started thinking about that. Then we started looking at Jeffrey Young from Allegra was saying, today's extraordinary is tomorrow's ordinary. And I remember thinking he's probably right. Back then what Artisan was doing with the 60s latte art on the cups, talking about traceability, talking about single origins and these things was extraordinary. But now you go into any coffee shop, specialty coffee shop, and that's the bare minimum that you expect. Yeah. So we started thinking about what's the next extraordinary. And the final thing we started talking about was why had the two artisans been so successful? Why had they won all those awards? Why had it got so much traction? And one of the things Magda and I identified was that we never stop training. I'll never stop training. Magda will never stop training. And anyone that works for us will always have a training hurdle put in front of them, a training program. And that's where the idea for the Artisan Coffee School came out. And the Artisan Coffee School was trying to put the school right in the center of a shop. So customers could look in and see this fantastic sort of scientific geekiness about coffee. And the students could look out and think, oh, there's a hustle and bustle coffee shop.
Was it the first one in Ealing that you opened up the school?
Yeah, so the school's in Ealing, and that's the hub, and it's always been in Ealing. And the school's something we're incredibly passionate about. I think we do about 1,400 students a year go through that school now, learning about coffee, and you literally see their eyes and their minds open up to coffee because they go in thinking, well, I'm just going to be taught how to press a button, and they leave thinking, oh my word, there's a whole world out there of knowledge, of interest, be it from farm and origin to roasting to brewing to espresso to sensory. There's this whole world
washing,
and they suddenly go, wow, I'm not just a barista. I've got a career. I've got an opportunity to actually work in an area that I love, and I think that's why the school really resonates and has something we're really proud of.
You do SCA diplomas, right?
We do. Yeah.
If I'm coming to you to your coffee school, I don't know much about coffee. Say I'm a coffee enthusiast.
Yeah.
Or I'm looking for a career in coffee. Can you explain to anyone who doesn't know what the SCA diploma is?
Yeah. So we're coupled with the SCA and the Specialty Coffee Association, and they have a education program which is all about sort of opening people's eyes up to the world of coffee.
Yeah.
If you want to sort of go for the highest qualification, I suppose, that is the SCA diploma in coffee. And then that's all done within points. So there are 5 different modules from barista, brewing, roasting, brewing, and sensory. And then they have different levels, foundation, intermediate, and professional. And each of those courses have associated different points. And essentially, once you get to 100 points, you get your diploma. Then you build your, to go with your interest, you build your diploma.
One thing that surprises me is over the years, I've realized that not many people want coffee. It's not something a lot of people strive to be. Even if they're working in a coffee shop, they're not thinking about creating coffee. But I think that mindset is changing a little bit. People are realizing, wait a minute, there's so much to learn. And I think what you guys are doing with the coffee school is the right sort of way to go about it. And someone is looking for a career in coffee.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there is a sort of a ceiling, isn't there, for a barista where they suddenly think, well, I've been a barista for a few years, I'll go and get a proper job, which breaks my heart to hear. I think there's probably quite a lot of emphasis on the industry itself, the owners of shops and hospitality business, to open those doors as much as possible. You know, for example, you guys and your lovely business, allowing people to move into managerial positions, allowing people to, you know, I remember once thinking, we need to grow into roasting and so on and so forth to keep our team, you know, to keep them motivated. So by me growing our business, it allowed our team to grow their skill set, to be motivated to the next line. And I think, you know, the industry needs to try and hold on to talent and retain talent as much as possible. And therefore, the emphasis is on us to give those opportunities wherever we see possible.
Edwin, tell us a little bit about your roastery. So you've started roastery around 2-3 years ago.
About 5 years ago.
Oh, 5 years
Time
ago.
flies when you're
Time
having
flies.
fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're representing with the t-shirt.
Yeah, Curious Brew.
Curious Brew.
So tell us a little bit about Curious Brew, how it all developed. Like, why has it been changed to a different name?
Yeah.
And
So Curious Brew came about, I think, almost like what we were just saying, because you know we got to the point of the 4 shops where we just thought we don't want any more. I think shops are a bit like kids. You know, you watch them make mistakes, you watch them get, you know, you're proud of them at different points and so on. So, but at its very essence, Artisan's a family business and an independent business. And we didn't want to just scale and just be a cookie cutter across the board. We wanted to know our customers. We wanted to love what we do. And I had a meeting once with David Page, who runs Franco Manca very successfully, and a nice guy. But he said to me, Edwin, look, for 4 or 5 shops, couple like you can run it off your phone. You know, you can manage. But if you go to sort of 7, 8, 9 shops, any profits those future shops make, that gets swallowed up by the investment you need to make in HR system, in having a company structure that supports maybe 90 staff. So therefore, you're not achieving anything by opening those shops 7, 8, 9. The decision is to move from 6 to 12, when you then start grabbing back the economies of scale and so on and so forth. And that really resonated with Magda and I, because we didn't want to grow to 12. That wasn't really our aim. So the idea that was kind of the scenario, and I could really see what he was talking about, made us really think that actually we don't want to just grow by having more shops. We want to cherish beautiful shops we've got, but we also knew there was a pressure to grow in a different way. So therefore, and we had the school already, so therefore roasting just became almost like the next natural step for us. We had the talent in the school, so we just had to join the dots. And the other thing that we were talking about just before that is we knew we had a little bit of demand from our own shop. So the risk was slightly less for us, because we knew how much coffee the Artisans were consuming, which meant we had a way in. And you ask about a different brand. At its core, Curious Brew we're sort of cousins, Artisan and Curious Brew. We all get drunk at the Christmas party together, but the rest of the year we're separate businesses. Mainly because I think people need to have laser focus on what they're good at. And at Curious Brew, we're laser focused on beautiful roasting and customer service in a wholesale environment. And by separating that, they are completely different skills to a shop and business, which needs to have laser focus on looking after your team, making sure they're trained and they're giving good customer service. So by separating them, it allowed us this degree of separation to then really be focused on one or the other. And I think that's worked. Curious Brew, the name is quite simple. If you want to be good at coffee, you've got to be curious. You've got to be willing to make mistakes. You've got to be willing to try different things. And my little boy, aged 5 or younger back then, he was obsessed by Winnie the Pooh. And in there's a little character called Roo. And it was his favorite character. And it's a nod to Magda's heritage in Perth. So it sort of all came together.
Yeah. Amazing.
In a taxi one night.
Nice.
Amazing. But listen, going back to because we did a little bit of background on you. We dug up and we found this old interview you guys did back in 2012.
Wow.
It's on YouTube.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen it, but it's on there.
Maybe.
It's got like 12 different parts to it. So it's not like one big video. You had to, I think it's more than 12 actually. It's about 20 different parts to it.
Right.
But anyway, so we were digging up the interview, and you and Magda were on it, talking about how challenging it is, obviously, to start a business, and how in the beginning the business takes over your life. A lot of sleepless nights. All you do and all you talk about essentially is business.
Yeah.
One thing you said that stuck with me. You said you absolutely have to have that passion in the beginning when you start. So after a decade or so in this specialty coffee industry, what would you say is your driving force now? Are you still, you and Magda, as passionate as you were in the beginning?
It's a great question. I think the short answer is yes, but I think where you direct your passions is what changes. I actually do believe there is something around owners and coffee shop fatigue, where they suddenly, after about, they sort of do this amazing open, it's exciting, they then get a little bit successful, it's great, and then they sort of plateau and it stays the same, and then they sort of don't quite have enough of either capital or whatever to sort of push through to the next, to expansion, and they just sort of sit there. And then they suddenly get into this Groundhog Day, don't they? Of, well, the same customers, same conversations about the weather, about whatever it might be.
Football.
And it's the same problems with suppliers and milk deliveries. And actually that begins to drag them down, and the passion begins to wane a little bit. I think where Magda and I have been quite clever, or not clever, but what we've sort of focused on is by growing the business in different ways, our passion's always sort of continued.
Yeah.
And what we've hopefully left behind, with the shops and the school and the roastery, and as we continue to grow, is a very solid, well-run business that actually doesn't need much of our time. I mean, I'll be completely honest, we're wholly involved in the shops, but we're not on the shop floor every day. We have a managers meeting once a week, we check in, we advise, we mentor, we do all these things. But it's not like it's draining every minute of my life like it was when we started. I saw the rosters for the first Artisan just about 2-3 months ago. And it was just Edwin, Magda, Magda, Edwin, Edwin, Magda, Magda, Edwin, Edwin, Magda. And I went through it, and it just kept saying these two names all the way through. And I was like, God, did we do? And we opened at 7, closed at 7. And I remember really bad hours, by the way. And I remember thinking, wow. But back then we were so passionate about it.
And passion brings a lot of energy.
It does. And also I think what's important to me is to not realize I'm working. And talking to you guys tonight, I don't realize I'm working. Talking to the managers about problems, that doesn't feel like work to me. These are just things I like talking about. Talking about customer flow, talking about retail and sales and average, that's just, it's all passionate. Do you know what I mean? So I think being in an area where you don't realize you're working is a great space to be.
For me to process the thought, having 5 coffee shops, a roastery and a school, there must be a lot of like day-to-day problems that you face. How do you guys manage it, like you and Magda? Is it like something like, Magda, you deal with this, and then Edwin, okay, you deal with this, or how do you actually,
So they are 3 separate businesses. That's how you look at it.
Yeah, and then you add on the 3 kids as well. You really got, it's the 3 kids that cause us the most problems. I think you should have become, somebody said to me, entrepreneurism is all about being completely comfortable with uncertainty. And that's what that's where we've ended up. I mean, like you guys, we both don't know whether our phones are going to ring in the next half an hour and all hell's going to break. Or are we going to have a great 6 months and, it's just going to tick on nicely in the background. And you get used to that and comfortable with that uncertainty. I think what you do need is to always try and manage yourself out of operational where possible. And I think that's a skill that I'm still learning, but you can tell when owners have it and when they don't. And if their phones constantly, we used to call it the going on holiday trick. We would never open another Artisan until we went on holiday and our phone didn't ring all week, because that meant the shop was running sufficiently and well by itself. And I remember the first time we went on holiday, our phones rang constantly, basically from morning to night, about where's this stock? And we went back to the shop and thought, right, we're definitely not ready to open the next one. Let's work on our systems, let's get the structure working.
That's a great way of looking at it.
And you get to go on holiday. So it does work quite nicely. And I think it is about sort of that, almost that organic growth, slow and steady, but you don't you leave behind a solid structure. And I think that then means you're not firefighting constantly. And because then if it was
structure
like,
is the key then.
Structure, good people, and sort of getting the real basics, like very clear job descriptions for the people that you're leaving in position.
As I told you earlier, I'm a keen listener to Fifth Grade Podcast, and we listened to the episode you did with Jeffrey Young. And the episode you were on was around team culture and how you have to, and you talked about how you have to lead by example. And as Zora mentioned, to have a right structure in place to make sure your team is happy. What other advice would you give to other coffee shop owners, managers, supervisors, anyone in a leadership position to keep and maintain a happy team?
I think it absolutely comes from the top. It does. I think that energy, that enthusiasm, that passion that we were talking about earlier, needs to come straight from the top. And there needs to be that degree of involvement, doesn't there, where the people see that you're absolutely willing to get your hands dirty, you're absolutely willing to do the graft. And, you know, if there's a deep clean happening in one of the shops, you know, Magda and I will be the first to put up our hands to do the worst jobs. If it's cleaning the toilet, let's do it. Because we know that sort of leading by example takes it. But then I think realizing that building a culture, it's not a quick fix. It's ingrained into a business. And the culture is set by your team, and the team is sort of standards are set by how you're acting and how you're thinking. So just really basic things like please and thank you. You know, the way we talk to our team, the way we respect them, the way we listen to them, the way we take on their ideas. I think there's nothing better in an organization that takes ideas from the team and then implements them. We talk a bit about Kaizen and the Kaizen approach, you know, and how that continual improvement and using those ideas from people on the, you know, people literally the baristas and these people and implementing them. And I think that works nicely. But it's also the softer stuff, isn't it? Going to the pub, you know, all this sort of things, quizzes, sports days, and whatever it might be. But we find that stuff all wraps around it. But I think you want to, and I think it's becoming more relevant, isn't it? You want to be creating a nurturing environment for your team. Because ultimately, right now, your team have the power. They can literally up and go to the next shop along. So there is now a responsibility on us to look after their well-being more than we've done before. Look after their how they're feeling at work and these sorts. And I think owners that don't catch on to that quickly will struggle because they'll just see this churn of employees just go through them. And if you're just seeing this churn, A, it's incredibly expensive. B, your customers don't like it. C, the coffee quality is probably getting a bit up and down. And D, you could end up out of business. So people have to catch on to this slightly new, softer approach when it comes to team culture and team motivation. And I think the ones that do it well will be much more successful than the ones that don't.
So Edwin, nowadays we don't hear the word COVID anymore, but I'm sure like
It's a good thing.
which is a good thing. And I think all of us, we moved on. But I think just to talk about, just to touch base, like how was the situation when the COVID hit? You know, can you just tell us like briefly how it affected and how did you kind of guys come out from that situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing we're talking about it in the past tense, isn't it? It was a crazy time, and we found ourselves in some very strange situation. Our first thought was straight, how do we look after our team? And we went to a sort of all the bags of coffee we sold could be bought by donation. And I remember we were trying to raise money because back then furlough hadn't started, yet we were being shut down. And I was like, how are the team going to even make rent? You know, how is this going to work? So we tried to raise money for the team, and it went really well because the customers suddenly saw this problem as well, and they bought into it, and they looked at, and they've been served coffee by the same people for 5 years, and they wanted to pick up. I think we raised £20,000, £21,000 in the first week of that, and that all went straight over to the team. So straight away, I think the team felt right. We're going to be looked after through this. And Our second problem was a sort of just a logistical problem. We'd just roasted a massive roast. I don't know what we were thinking or why we weren't paying attention, but I remember we had about a ton of roasted coffee just sitting in all the shops and all around in the roastery, and we brought it into one shop, and I've got this photo somewhere. It's a great photo, a mound of coffee in Putney. I mean, just massive, huge. And I remember phoning a good friend of mine, Ben Aronston, who's sort of quite good and quick on his feet, and saying, "Look, mate,
Do you want coffee?
how do we get rid of a ton of coffee with no shops open overnight?" And overnight, me and him basically came up with a back of a napkin plan to start Curious Roux at home. And while everyone else was watching Netflix, Magda, myself, and the 3 kids were basically, in the morning we'd get down and they would bag up the coffee out of, from the big buckets it was in, bag it up. And then I'd take the orders online, and then I'd deliver it with my boy Niall around southwest and West London out the back of the car. And it began to snowball and snowball and snowball. And after about 8 weeks, or no, probably about 6 weeks, I remember saying to Magda, a bit funny, but I think we're going to have to roast some more coffee this way. and Curious Roux at home was born. And the rest, all I can say, was moving a phenomenal amount of tables and chairs in and out of different shops, and the amount of screens we put up, took down, put up. We had our benchmark was always to use the staff member that was most nervous. That was the level that we'd use. So if there was a member who wanted us to all wear gloves, we'd all wear gloves. If somebody wanted us to wear, whatever it was, the person who was most nervous in our team, that was our. So nervous is probably the wrong word, but you know what I mean. One thing we did do was strip everything back. We didn't sell pasta like most places. We sort of stopped that one. But we did. We stripped it back and said, look, at our core, we're famous for coffee. Let's just sell coffee. Yeah. We went all the way back, coffee. And we're still nowhere near, we don't have as big a menu as we did. And in many ways, it's been beneficial for us as a business in terms of some of the ideas that come out of COVID. And on top of that, I think looking back for hospitality, some of the things the government did were pretty good.
Absolutely.
I don't think we can really grumble too much. And the 5% on VAT was very good. The furlough was very good. Business rates was very good. So I don't think any business that was sort of concentrating and focused should have come through. I do think now there are more challenges actually right now in the next year than there've ever been before, because we're back up to all the rates, all the VAT.
We got used to it.
We did get a bit too used to it. But then we have a whole lot of more hurdles, and this inflation, this Brexit, and the recruitment crisis, and all this sort of thing. I think you'll see more businesses hospitality businesses go under now than you actually did through COVID. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah. Did you shop the shops, all the shops?
We shopped for about
COVID hit?
6 weeks, I think it was.
Okay, all the shops.
All the shops.
We were the same.
I think we were the same. Yeah, because in the beginning it was a bit confusing because they said you can do takeaway. But we weren't sure. Are we classed as takeaway, or is it just takeaway Uber stuff?
There was all that, and I mean, I think like you guys, we probably flirted with online ordering and should we build an app and all this stuff. There is actually an Artisan app all built. We never press go on it because our approach is to keep things as simple as possible. But we all sort of had these.
For me, it was in a way a good time. It's so weird to say COVID came at a good time, but I was due to have my second son.
Oh wow!
And my second son was literally
same thing.
2 or 3 days into lockdown, so I was gonna be off for a few weeks anyway. So when that happened, we thought, you know what, I'm gonna take the time off anyway. We decided to close the shops for 5 or 6 weeks, and then we get our thoughts together, see where this is going, and then come back. Amazing, man. So apart from COVID, I know we touched on COVID, over the past 10 years or so, what would you say has been your biggest challenge?
I think getting the timing right of growth is very tricky. And being strong enough to not get ahead of yourself. So a company like Artisan, been approached many times by investors. It's been approached many times by buyers.
Yeah.
But not jumping through flattery. And I'm pretty proud that it's still just Magda and I who both own 50%, and that's it. And we've done this growth sort of organically. But I remember there have been times when I knocked on my brother's door and said, "I'm really sorry, I need £5,000 and I need it tonight," because we've just got it wrong, and I know that we'll be okay in 3 months' time, but our cash flow is I've just messed it up. We've gone slightly too fast, too quick. And luckily he stumped up and so on and so forth. So just keeping an eye on cash flow, making sure that's all making sense, and then growing when you need to grow, but not going too fast. I think you do see, I'm not going to name, but you do see companies make mistakes by going too quickly and then going under, essentially. And these are great businesses that we've known and respect. And you just think, somewhere they've got their hands. I think you've got to be very careful with taking on investment. I think you've got to be very careful with taking on debt. And you've got to really understand, all the mathematics behind that. And before you sort of succumb to the flattery of people approaching you. And it's very easy to do it. And I understand why people, but I think there's a big risk involved with that. I think is probably one of the biggest challenges.
Okay.
That's an amazing advice, I think.
Yeah. But you have you said you've got 3 kids, right?
Yeah. Well, that's the biggest challenge.
So we've got 2 of our own, right? We've got 2 each. And it's always interesting to me to speak with people who are businessmen, who do have businesses and got family, they've got kids. It's always interesting for me to find out the work-life balance. Yeah. I know so many people who do have a business, who do have a family, and they get to a stage where, they compromise on one. Yeah. They don't spend as much time with the kids as they should. Yeah. They don't spend as much time in the business as they should. Yeah. So that work-life balance, what is your advice on it?
Yeah. So I think this is a really good and quite an important question. I think, look, I remember being under the coffee machine in Stamford Brook, fixing a plumbing problem while Niall, my boy, took his first few steps at home. And I'd just been called out. And I remember being so cross and just thinking, God, what am I doing here? However, I think what we do gives us ultimate flexibility. And if I want to, on a Tuesday afternoon, go and watch my boy play cricket at 3:00, I can. And I do. And if I want to take the girls swimming, I can, because we have control over our work life.
I think essentially it comes back to the structure we were talking about. No?
But not many people have that. And if I talk to my friends in the city, they leave before the kids wake up. They get back before the kids, after the kids have gone to bed. And Saturday and Sunday, they're running their kids around. For us, it's completely different. The other thing that I think Magda, and I'm pretty sure Magda will agree with, is that we completely co-parent. So it really is 50-50, depending on which kid is getting us. And again, that's amazing for a dad to be able to actually say they're spending pretty much 50% of their time parenting with the mum. And I think that's good. Where we have got to in our lives is complete acceptance that we run a company that may need us. And we know that on a Sunday night, our phones might ring and I might now have to go into work very early in the morning, or I might have to go in then and there and sort out a problem. And yes, we were about to play a big family game or something, but I have to go. That's fine. Because also I know the payback is on a Tuesday afternoon, I can just actually duck out, pick up my kids from school, go and take them to the park and get all that benefit from that. And I think you've got to learn to, what we tried to do in the beginning, which didn't work, was we tried to segment Artisan family, and we tried to keep them separate. And we tried to say, right, we're not going to talk about Artisan after 7:00 or something like that. We had a silly rule like that. It doesn't work because suddenly something comes in that you need to sort out. So we've just sort of allowed the two to merge completely together and go, we run a family business. This is what family businesses do. And this is how family businesses act. And as soon as you learn to accept it, and you sort of take a deep breath and go, no, my family is part of the business. And yeah, there have been times where kids have, rather surprised suppliers have seen like 2 kids turned up with coloring books that they sort of sat in the corner as we're having big supply meetings or whatever it might be. That's just us.
Yeah.
And we're happy with it.
Great to talk about Edwin today. About Artisan, about your roastery, about the training school. So what we want to find out, what's next for Artisan? I think that's kind of will be like the closing question. What will be the next for Artisan? We're gonna see more like food coming up.
No, we do have something, and actually, it's the first time we're sort of announcing it publicly.
lucky us.
So you'll be pleased to know. We're going to try and solve a big problem in the industry, and that essentially is how you motivate your team, and how you give them ownership, and how you let them then grow. Because it's our managers that are amazing. So what we've launched within Artisan is something called the Coffee Shop Project. And where our managers who've worked with us or our heads, we will invest in them to set up their own coffee shop. Because essentially they've been in an apprentice-like scheme with us for the last 4 or 5 years. So they know inside and out how we act, how we deal with different scenarios, how to run a shop beautifully. The one thing they don't have is capital necessarily. But the one thing they do have is the skills to run their own shop. So we just are going to facilitate joining the dots through the Coffee Shop Project. And that means Artisan will probably have one of the best career paths you could. You start as a barista, senior barista, manager, end up with your own shop. And so that to me is really, really exciting and something that I think is unique. And I think we begin to see a way of going back to our very first topic of really holding on to talent within the industry. And I think that's something that we need to all be looking at ways of doing.
It's holding on to talent. And I think we cover this as well, like how people don't see working in coffee as a career choice. And I think what you guys are doing is amazing, because it will give people the motivation to look at coffee as a career choice.
One day I can be an owner.
Exactly.
It's fantastic to hear, man. And I'll be very keen. We'll be very keen to know how it goes.
Yeah, we'll keep you updated.
Yeah, definitely. Edwin, thank you very much for your time today.
No problem.
Really appreciate it. And
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.